Begin by safely lifting and supporting your Macan. If you have a steel suspension, it's pretty straightforward. If you have PASM air suspension or a GTS, there are some special things you need to do to safely raise and support it. Please see our article and video on how to safely raise and support your Macan for additional assistance. Once you remove the rear wheels, you'll be looking at the caliper, red arrow, and the disc or rotor. If you're going to be replacing the rotor and you live in a four-season climate, now is a good time to hit the locating screw on the rotor, yellow arrow, with a little penetrating spray. The parking brake on the Macan is electronic. It needs to be retracted in order to compress the piston back into the caliper to remove and install new pads. If you're going to be working on your vehicle, buy or borrow a scan tool. It will come in very handy and help you save time and eliminate trouble. Now, while you will find information on the internet about removing the parking brake mechanism and turning the adjustment mechanism clockwise with a T40 torque, to do this you have to open up the system, and that can cause problems down the road. If you have a scan tool, you can simply go to the special functions and electronic parking brake screen. The screen and tool will walk you through putting the parking brake into the installation position. You will hear the electronic motor retracting the mechanism once activated. Follow the pad wear sensor from the caliper to the mount on the bracket as indicated by the blue arrow. Unclip the connection and separate them. Pry the small nub on the sensor end, yellow arrow, out from the bracket. Turn the connection 90 degrees and remove it from the bracket. Release the sensor wire from the rubber connection on the bleed nipple, yellow arrow. There are two 13mm bolts that attach to the slide bolts that hold the caliper to the bracket, blue arrows. The slide bolts tend to rotate while trying to remove the 13mm bolts. You will need a thin-walled 15mm wrench or to grind yours down to make it fit, red arrow. While bracing it, use a 13mm socket, yellow arrow, and remove the bolt. Do this for both the upper and lower bolts. Once the bolts are removed, you can pull the caliper towards you. This will force the caliper piston back into the caliper and give you enough room to remove it from the bracket. Once the piston is retracted a little, lift the caliper up and off the bracket. Safely hang it out of the way. Do not ever let it hang by the brake line. This can cause serious damage and even lead to ripping the brake line and brake failure. There are two brake pads. Both pads sit in clips on the bracket, yellow arrows. Grasp the pad, red arrow, and just pull them out. Remove both pads. If you're going to be replacing the rotors, use a T30 torque and remove the locating screw, yellow arrow. If you are replacing the rotors, remove the brake pad clips from the bracket, yellow arrows. They just unclip from the bracket. You do not need to remove the bracket itself. The rotors can be really stuck on. You may need to use a soft hammer and hit the bell with it to break the grip. If you live in a four-season climate, spray it with some penetrating oil. Once removed, clean the mounting flange of any rust so it is a clean and flat surface. There is only one piston in the rear caliper. Use a clamp and retract it back into the caliper, yellow arrow. Make sure to check the level of the brake fluid in the reservoir, yellow arrow. While you are retracting the piston, you are actually pushing brake fluid back into the reservoir. Be prepared to suck a little out with a turkey baster if needed. Installation is the reverse of removal. Make sure that you keep the new pads and rotors clean and do not get any grease, anti-seize, or any other substance on the pads or rotors. Make sure to use all new hardware. The hardware is micro-encapsulated, red arrow, and should be considered single-use only. Remember to pump the brakes to bring the pads back into contact with the rotors and reset the parking brake back out of the installation mode. Bed the brake pads in according to the manufacturer of the pads you bought, and remember your braking force will be diminished up to about the first 100 miles. Thanks for watching. Be sure to subscribe to our channel and check out another video in this series.